There's been more than 200 fatalities involving trains during this time.
Why is that?
This article does not cover that. It does say the train has been dubbed the killer train. This is not the PR you're going for.
All PR is good PR, man.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Welcome back to Skippy and Doogles Talk Investing. We are so excited to have you all here today, and even more excited when you send us listener mail. skippydoogles@gmail.com. We'd like to hear your thoughts and your questions. What do you have for us? Especially love those complaints. Thank you for those all the time. About the markets, about Skippy, whatever you want to complain about, it's all fine.
And as a refresher, you can send those complaints to firedoogles@gmail.com.
Full of them.
I don't love the complaints quite as much as you, Doogles. Actually, I do.
I like productive tension. That's what I call it. Productive
There
tension.
we go.
We have 4 items for you all today. We're going to start off talking about the downsides of copying the quote-unquote best. Then discuss a train down in Florida, hit up the Uber Waymo situation, and then wrap it up with what kind of technology is AI? Is it quote-unquote normal technology? Cover a piece that talks about that. To get started, I think the best way about this copying the best piece, let's just play this clip.
Please do.
Well, I read a blog post by P. Mark, aka Mark Andreessen, where he said, "Don't keep a schedule," and I took that to heart. So I deleted my calendar, and I don't keep a schedule. I try to remember it all in my head. If I can't remember it, I'm not going to add it.
I'm glad you got here
schedule.
on time.
Yeah, exactly. I had to look things up at the last minute. But ironically, I don't even know if Mark himself follows that, but he made the correct point. I read a little story about Jack Dorsey doing all his business off his iPhone and iPad and not even going into a Mac. And I said, okay, I want to do that. So I'm going to operate through text messaging, and I put up my nasty email.
Does that feel like more freedom?
It does, yeah, because you're on the go. So I have a nasty email autoresponder that says I don't check email and don't text me either, right? If you need to find me, you'll find me. Obviously, some of this is a luxury of success, but some of these habits I adopted long before, actually. The hostile email autoresponder started a long time ago. I used to own the domain. I let it go.
Don't do coffee.com.
I don't do coffee.com. I used to reply from that email just so people would get the point. But I stopped being rude about it. Now I just ghost. I just disappear. My wife knows not to ever book or schedule me for anything. I'm not expected to go to couples dinners. I'm not expected to go to birthdays. I'm not expected to go to weddings. If somebody tries to rope her into having me show up, she says he makes his own decisions. You got to ask him directly.
What about
and vice versa?
Are you not killing serendipity in a way, Dad?
No. I'm freeing up all my time. So my entire life is serendipity. I get to interact with whoever I want, whenever I want, wherever
So you'll
I want.
hear the environment.
What's your first reaction to this?
Well,
This is Naval Ravikant, by the way, everyone.
Okay. So this is Naval. He's worth, according to Google, 120 million bucks. He's not worth Elon money, right? He's worth plenty of money. Early investor in AngelList, Uber, Twitter, right? There's books been written about this dude. Okay.
Yeah.
And he's taken his so-called success, I put that in quotes, and turned that into, my wife can't schedule a couple's dinner for me? What? Don't you like hanging out with your wife? Don't you like hanging out with your family, friends? Isn't that a highlight of your week? Like, how have we got so lost here? This drives me mad. The whole I don't keep a schedule at all is like, you're just disrespectful to everyone you interact with. Just flat out.
No, I like how he said, I used to be rude about it. Now I just ghost them. So maybe it was like 3-4 weeks ago, we were talking about how there was this video of Zuck and how it's an example of when you get too much money because you're trying to raise the best beef. And so therefore you start a brewery and therefore you start a macadamia nut factory, whatever it is. There's a point where you get so, I don't know if this is the right word. I'm just going to say weird. It doesn't make sense how you interact. And if you take your own actions, and there's a lot of flaws in what I'm about to say, but if you take your own actions and say, if everyone behaved like this, what would the world be like? And you go,
society crumbles.
everything would come to an end.
There's a quote that says something along the lines of like, to be human is to value other people's time as much as your time. What's really weird, and listen, I understand some people have really busy jobs and some people have a little more free time. I understand that happens sometimes, right? The CEO of a company typically has limited time. But when you get to a place in your life where you treat your time as if it's valuable and assume that everyone else's time is completely worthless, you're just a jerk. That, in my eyes, I don't know a better word.
Yeah, I do not think I would be married for particularly long if there was literally anything that followed this start to a sentence. My wife knows better than to. No matter what comes after that, it's not okay.
And then I'll get the quote wrong, but something like, she says he's his own person and he makes his own schedule or something. It's like, sorry, our 3-year-old Timmy has trouble with play dates. Like, what? You're an adult, dude. Again, actually, Naval has one of my favorite quotes, absolutely favorite of the whole world, that I'm going to have to reconsider after this, that says something along the lines of, life is about getting what you want out of it. And what he means by that is, if you want to be a surf bum, don't get caught at KPMG working till midnight every night for 45 years when your goal is attainable. You can go do the thing you want. If you want to buy a cul-de-sac of houses with your friends, don't lose sight of the true dream, because not all of the true dreams cost a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And society can mess you up in a way that makes you go do something that you don't even care about and you're not passionate about. That's a great mindset. But this is not that. This is, I'm a petulant child, and how dare I plan? Like, you and I have great friend groups that we cherish going on trips together with. Can you imagine being like, sorry, I can't schedule that? It's the highlight of a year. Like, and you're just like, sorry, maybe if I remember it on Thursday, I'll jump on the plane.
I'll be there. I'll be there. I don't know when, but I'll be there. When I remember, I'll just book the flight. And this, as I previewed at the start, to me, this triggered that thought around copying the quote unquote best. Because and understandably, what we try and do is we look at what the quote unquote best, the quote unquote most successful people do, and then say, I'm going to adopt these behaviors, these practices, so that I can also attain their success. You talk about it a lot in the investing world with like Buffett, for example. And the danger, number one danger, I would say, these people, you're not these people. Like, the circumstances aren't the same. Your personalities aren't the same. There are things that to what you were talking about, you dream of, that you cherish. That's different. What matters to you is so different. There was something I was reading the other day. Maybe it was Money and Me. It might have been a Money and Me. There was something that talked about principles over practices. And I think that that's a really beautiful phrase. Because if you take I'm going to extrapolate some of what he's saying and just extract this part out. If you take the principle of it, leave time for serendipity in your life. Leave time for the ability for things to hit you. Great. Okay. You take that to the practice of don't schedule anything. Don't care about what other people think. Don't go to birthday parties with your wife. By the way, she's gone with somebody. So I would just go ahead and check that out.
She wants to celebrate her birthday with somebody.
Yeah, like someone's there, just to be clear. If you take it to that extreme, then it just does not work. It does not work.
You're so right. Well, the funniest thing is he credits Mark Andreessen, right?
Yeah, it was Mark Andreessen. That's what he talks about at the beginning. And then he talks about Jack
Andreessen, and then he says Mark doesn't even follow this rule. So he maybe Mark's a little more sane. You're so right. You can build in a few hours a day and a few weeks a year that is completely free for serendipity. You took it too far, dude.
FYI. I think I've told you about Janice. Have I told you about Janice before?
No.
Okay. So there was a point at one of my jobs where my calendar was getting so booked that there just was not time for things. So I had this one-on-one with Janice. And this was time that there was no one named Janice at the organization. And it was just time that I had that was recurring that I could think. That I could where I had free space. It lasted, I think, a good 7-8 months. And then somebody just went, who is Janice? Like, who is this person? Don't worry about Janice. We don't talk about Janice.
We don't talk about Janice.
My goodness.
We're going to switch gears hard. There's no appropriate transition to this to talk about rail infrastructure and commuter trains in Florida. Or as you said, Florida.
Florida.
There's a billionaire. I like this billionaire. His name's Wes Edens, who dreamed of commuter rail in Florida, right?
As one
That's what
does.
he dreamed of.
As one does.
As we all have on a Thursday night, right?
Exactly.
And he bought up some rail track and he loaded the thing up with debt, again, as one does.
Yep.
And he built a commuter rail line from Orlando to Miami with a planned eventual connection to Tampa. It's called Brightline, right? Brightline is kind of awesome. It has a loyal readership. Let me just quote a few things from this FT article. So it's launched in 2023. Brightline East makes Florida's journey, the full journey, in about 3.5 hours. Round trip price of less than $200 per passenger. It's cultivated a loyal customer base, wooed stations with bars, beanbag seated areas, potted plant palm trees, as well as Instagram and TikTok influencers. What could go wrong, Doogles? This is like everyone in America has been screaming we need trains forever, and Brightline has solved the issue.
I have one macro issue, and then I'll let you get back to the specific case.
Okay.
It's described as high-speed rail.
It's not high speed.
240 miles, which is the length of this time, in 3.5 hours is like what it takes to drive.
Not high speed. Okay, but let's tie that up. So 3 million riders used the service last year. So that's a rough take. Traffic between Orlando and Miami is historically rough, and that same trip, often with traffic, can take 5 hours. I'm not claiming this is
Okay.
from Tokyo to Kyoto. All right, just to be crystal clear. Now, the downside is really the debt, which we're going to talk about, and the fact that there's been more than 200 fatalities involving trains during this time.
Why is that?
This article does not cover that in depth. It does say, however, that the train has been dubbed the killer train. This is not the PR you're going for, okay? However, here's all I know.
All PR is good PR, man.
Brightline has not been found legally responsible for any of the deaths. I think what's really happening here is these are train. I mean, these I know because this is how Wes and his team bought them. Mm-hmm. These are train tracks that weren't being used frequently. Like, that's how you acquire these things. They effectively go defunct, and people aren't used to the traffic, right? This is an investing podcast. None of that really matters. Obviously, like for our conversation, right?
Yep.
What's so interesting is the business model kind of works. Like, if you don't have to pay off the infrastructure debt, they claim to be profitable. The problem is buying infrastructure like this is incredibly expensive. And where I want to go with you is just to talk about what the way this article frames it, which is like, can you do infrastructure like this privately, or does it always have to be municipalities involved that can take the cost of that infrastructure and either supply it for maybe less than its true value or help subsidize it with some sort of other fees? The reason I want to talk about subsidies specifically is you talk about all those highways that were built there. Yep. And I can guarantee you not all those are toll roads that are positive cash flow for the state, city, or county, right? And so the question is, he seems to have proven that it doesn't work. Without that, is it fair to take that approach, the same approach you'd have for a highway, and apply it to trains?
That is the real question. Before we get to that question, human beings, we grow up, but do we grow up? It seems like we don't learn some things. So my son puts up a lemonade stand with his friends. You gotta buy the lemonade. The cups cost money. You have to measure out how much are you serving so you can figure out profit loss. This is what, as an adult, you got to do these things. He says, yeah, but if you ignore the cost of what it all is, like, it's profitable. Okay. You fast forward, however, I don't know how old this guy is, but you fast forward 40 years and still the same issue. Yeah. If you ignore the cost of setting the whole thing up, it works. That's not the way you run business. Okay. Anyway, all that
it's
aside.
funny you speak about kids because this guy, I'm sure, wanted to ride trains as a kid. This is his childhood dream that you're
Yeah.
rudely
Exactly.
dismissing.
To your point, though, I think there are two things that pop up here that are two sides of that coin. There's one, which is directly the question that you asked, is can the startup costs be effectively managed privately? The other one is, can the operations, I'd say the actual behavior of setting it up, the practices, can that work privately? And I think they've shown that the second, deaths aside, again, now I'm ignoring something. If you put the deaths aside, privately, you can set up a train system, get it going, and there seems to be some level of success there. That's cool. However, the finances, it does seem like it does not work for that to be, which makes sense to me. To your point around roads, like this stuff, it takes so long for these things to be paid off, like decades for these things to be paid off. And that is what government, something with a long-term view like government, kind of has to take on. It just does not work from an investing standpoint, I think, is what this is showing.
I mean, I love free markets more than anyone on earth, and I love businesses that make profit after including all expenses. I hate EBITDA and everything else, right? But I will say, maybe this is a terrible analogy, this is like U.S. car manufacturers trying to compete with Chinese car manufacturers when Chinese car manufacturers get a ridiculous amount of government subsidies and therefore cost half the price. And so when we expect, if the gasoline tax and 1,000 other federal funds fund construction of a new interstate, and that cost never pencils, that's thought of as infrastructure that makes the community better, and then you ask trains or any other mode of transportation to compete against that without the same subsidies, or in a lot of cases just free money, you can't do it, right? And so I just think there's a holistic reset that needs to be considered. As a country, we've decided that our future continues to be interstate systems and hopefully cars that drive themselves. It's not going to be trains. But if we want it to be trains, you just have to call it apples to apples. Right now, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I think there's an analogy to the personal life, the individual. If you take parents and kids, and we've talked a lot about education on here, and the cost of education has gone up so much, and there's so much student loan debt, etc. Yeah. If you compare someone going to, let's say, an expensive school, and having to take out debt fully to go to that school, and then paying off that debt over 20, 30 years after they get out, and compare that to like the Substack that we discussed a few weeks ago, where their parent just pays for the whole thing, and compare the finances of those two individuals, it is so different. It's vastly different. How do you expect those two people to compete financially? Because there's a lot else in life, but I'm just to compete financially in life after that point. It's very difficult. It's the same thing here. When there's something that you have to pay off over decades, it's really hard to compare a subsidized situation and an unsubsidized situation.
That is a good analogy. All right, so with that, I want to talk about anonymous cars. And I want to talk about
anonymous cars,
anonymous drivers, anonymous vehicles, autonomous.
Hold on. Let's speak about anonymous cars for a second. When I'm using Waze, and there are all these little, like the Waze icons of other cars that are out there, I try and find them sometimes.
Waze, but I know, yes.
I try and find these people. Like, who is this dude in the pirate hat? Like, have you ever tried to find them? It's really hard. I want to make the anonymous not anonymous. Anyway, okay, back to you. Autonomous vehicles.
Sorry, it's early. Okay, so one of the most fascinating investing hypotheses that has been happening in real time over the past 3 years is the rideshare companies and how they deal with a transition to autonomous vehicles. Okay? This is Salesforce and the transition to AI, but this is happening in physical infrastructure. So fascinating. The biggest rideshare provider in the world is Uber. And believe it or not, Uber Eats is now growing rapidly and almost 50% of all trips. So Uber's a monster. Uber just bought Delivery Hero, which has 12 markets in Europe that they're expanding to. Okay. So here's a number you need to know because I want to talk a little bit about this in detail. For every one ride that Waymo does, Uber does 550.
Okay. That's larger.
Okay.
Yep. Just quick math.
Based on Waymo's internal funding and a recent drop in Uber stock, based on news I'm going to talk about in just a second, the values of those companies are thought to be about the same. Okay. And Uber has started a weird lobbying campaign. So Uber is partners with Waymo. You can book a Waymo in Austin, Texas, and Atlanta, Georgia through the Uber app. And those two were combined as partners for logical reasons because Waymo was entering new markets, didn't have much of a brand, and wanted to get ridership. Okay. The news that came out late last week is Waymo's PR team going to the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, everyone else, and saying, oh, we think we're going to break the partnership with Uber. Now, of course they are, because Uber's been lobbying to every government in the world about the concerns of autonomous vehicles and Waymo, because if the adoption happens too rapidly, that could be bad for their business model. Follow all this so far?
If they don't have autonomous vehicles. Yeah.
Yes. But Uber is speaking out of both sides of their mouth and has 20 plus partnerships with autonomous vehicle providers. They're launching in London and Dubai and 1,000 other cities, and they work with the Amazon provider and Waymo and all this new tech and the tech in India and et cetera, et cetera. You get this, right?
Yep.
Uber's job right here is to cannibalize the number of trips because that helps with their network effects and make sure that whoever wins the autonomous vehicle race, call it, is a partner of theirs. They have made equity investments in, again, like 10 plus of these Waymo competitors. Okay. So that all sets the stage for Uber stock getting crushed because people think that Waymo wins and takes over the world and Uber gets left behind. Do you have any questions before I lead us to water here?
I think I've got the context. I did not realize Waymo was valued the same as Uber.
Mm-hmm.
So that's wild to me. Continue.
So Uber will tell you that the reason they will always be needed for Waymo or any other AV provider is the peak ridership problem.
Yep.
And what the peak ridership problem is that demand on Friday night is many multiples demand on Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Demand on Saturday night is many multiples what the demand is on Sunday at 2 p.m. This is pretty obvious stuff, right? And so if Waymo comes into a market and Waymo goes it alone, they would want to maximize utilization of their cars. That's how they make money. How do they choose how many cars to buy? Do they size for peak ridership on Friday night? No, because then they have cars sitting idle 98% of the time. Do they idle for average volume midday? Like, it's a tough problem to solve, right? And so Uber and Lyft, to a certain extent, have always said the appropriate combination for everyone's profitability is for a company like Waymo to partner with us. We maximize their utilization of the robot drivers, but then we can scale up with the human drivers for those peak times. And by doing that, theoretically, all parties are more profitable. Waymo appears to have decided to go it alone or maybe find another partner that can help them scale up to peak times. What I'm trying to do here is just set the stage for why the stock and the investing hypothesis is so interesting, because it's really, I mean, we're bordering on a coin flip, right? Like, I don't know what the future holds. I know that Uber does almost 500 times the trips at comparable profitability, and Uber has this network effect the world over that it would take Waymo a decade plus to match. I also tend to believe that the technology is very, very hard for AVs, but Waymo won't be the only provider that can safely drive people from point A to point B with robots. And if that's the case, if this becomes commoditized, right? If there's 10 companies that can do a comparable job to Waymo, then I think Uber is an obvious winner just because of the scale that they have. What do you think?
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense to me, and I'm also gonna use this word because you reminded me of it. That you have the peak ridership problem. There's also the puke ridership problem,
Yes.
right? Both of those, which if folks have not read about this, there are people that are falling asleep, vomiting,
Forgetting to close the door.
having
Like-
babies.
But-
People are doing things in Waymos that are causing the cars to call 911 because it's just off the beaten path. That's another human intervention necessary situation that's there. The peak ridership problem and the puke ridership problem.
Mhm.
What is wild to me on that 550, which is why you brought it up, is so you have to assume that a business, if you take Uber's business and automate it, it is 550 times as good, like from a financial perspective. That's effectively kind of what you're saying. Because you're saying
I'm saying even more than that because Uber is also free cash flow positive and Waymo loses money hand over fist, but that's different. The
Yeah.
Waymo's still a startup, right?
But if Uber were to automate everything tomorrow, the business should be 550 times as valuable. I know that's not
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that when you say it that way, someone's going to go, obviously not. And you're like, okay, then why?
Mhm.
Then why would you put this business in that valuation light? The valuation alone is the thing that like really gets to me. I do believe that Uber at some point, to your London, et cetera, like everything else they're doing, they're going to have, let's call it 80-20, because that's always a good ratio.
Yeah.
80% automation, 20% human. Taking humans completely out of it would be near impossible. Like, I can't imagine how that would happen. Or why that, like how and why, because there's just going to be these situations when you have peaks and pukes. You can probably figure out the peak situation to a certain extent without humans. You can solve that over time. I think Uber probably has the data to be able to figure that out over time, but it'll take time.
Well, to your point, this is how I feel. I mean, I just threw out like Salesforce and AI, but what you're calling the puke ridership problem is like, it's nice to have a human that you could call that's 2 blocks away. The more common one has been closing the door, right? The rider gets out, leaves the door open. The car is unable to close the door by themselves, at least on the old ones.
Yeah.
And so Waymo's been paying people like $11 on TaskRabbit to go find the car and close the door, right? This hybrid network has advantages, and it especially has advantages when it has a 500 to 1 head start. I completely understand why Waymo would say Uber seems like a bad partner here because they have equity stakes in 10 of our competitors, and in certain communities they're lobbying against us, but they don't have a choice unless Waymo says we're going all in with you right now and we want you to help maximize our utilization. And of course Waymo wouldn't want to do that because they're out raising money at a drastically different valuation. If they hand over all their kind of ridership data and owning the customer relationships to Uber, their company is not valued anywhere near the same because they're just a commodity that Uber owns a customer relationship for. I think it's one of the most fascinating investing discussions that's going on right now. And that's the really high level. You could go deep in the weeds. I don't think our listenership wants to do that necessarily, at least not all of them. But I think Uber has a huge head start, and that doesn't mean they can't lose it. And that doesn't mean I don't prefer Waymo, because I absolutely do. I think it's a better rider experience. I think it's worth more money.
Get rid of the steering wheel. Like that whole thing.
That's gone away. But I just will be really excited to see what the appropriate mix of humans and robots is 10 years from now and what that means from a business perspective. Because I know you can run with just robots and probably provide a better experience. I don't know if you can run a company that's profitable that way.
Yeah. I think that's right. And it's these quote unquote like the edge cases that you kind of have to be able to take care of, but there's so many of them that you start to see when you call something better, I'll say better, even if it's the self-drivingness is better than the human, there's certain things that like only humans can do, at least as what we see right now and for the foreseeable future. So it makes me think about this. I started rewatching Seinfeld from the beginning. And one of his little stand-up things at the beginning of an episode, he says, if an alien came down and just observed a human walking their dog, who do you think they would think is in charge? Because in what situation when someone poos and then someone else picks it up and carries it around for them, would you expect them to be in charge? I bring that up here only to say the dog can't do it on their own. Like there's some things that only the human can do, even if that belittles them. There's an analogy for you.
Oh, I love it.
All right. You ready to transition? Okay. Our last topic. There's a Substack by Arvind Narayan. Sorry if I got your name wrong, but Arvind, I like your Substack. The title of this is What Will Be Left for Us to Work On? And AI as Normal Technology is the name of the blog. So he lays out this keynote that he gives. And I just want to hit on a few of the items here. Here are the points I want to discuss. So he calls AI, quote unquote, normal technology, and then starts to look back. History is good for rhyming. Starts to look back at prior times that technology came out and is saying, what's the most analogous situation that we can look for AI right now? And the reason why he calls it normal technologies is because he's saying, like, we talk about revolution, we talk about these big things, and he goes, but it's just tech, as we talk about all the time. It's a tool. It's just technology. Okay? So if you look at how technology rolls out, the analogy that I really like that he brings up is electricity. I think this is an awesome analogy. So he says when electricity comes out, factories at the beginning, they didn't get a lot. Right? If you just swap out steam engines for electric motors, you don't automatically just, even though it's quote unquote better, you don't automatically just get all the benefit. He said what happened was they all come later after you completely reorganized how the factory worked. And so similar with AI, what he says is if you just like drop in AI as a replacement for employees, and we're seeing this right now, it just does not work.
Yeah.
I don't think that on its face is necessarily a surprise to folks, but we act like it should. And like that's why it's important. Like take that fundamental item because we act like it should. I'll pause. Anything so far?
No.
Okay. So what he's saying is like the redesigning companies, jobs, workflows, incentives. You have to redesign all of this stuff in order to get the benefit of AI. The other thing that he lays out, I think this is awesome. This made me think about kids, humans growing up. It says AI's capabilities are improving much faster than its reliability. Just like children, right? Human beings when they're growing up, they start to get all these capabilities. They can do more things. I can jump, I can run. Yeah, you jump, but then you jump into like the muddy puddle. Like that is not reliable. Yeah, you can speak now, but now you're saying all these potty words. Anyway, capability increasing much faster than its reliability. And so if you take like an agent can score well on a benchmark. You know, we have all these like coding benchmarks, which is usually what's looked at, but still be so inconsistent and fragile that you can't trust it with real work. I think that's incredibly important. Capability improving much faster than reliability. Cool thing to keep in mind. Okay. The most automatable skills may be the easiest to verify. So pure technical execution will become cheaper, but judgment, domain knowledge, taste, evaluation, all that kind of stuff, deciding what matters will become more valuable. I think that's pretty cool. And that idea of, if you go back to the title of this, what will be left for us to work on, I think that hits really at the core of it.
I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it's related to the decide piece. Decide, execute, deliver sandwich, right? And he has the traditional method where decide is like this thin bun, and then there's this huge hamburger patty that's the execution piece, and then delivering is another thin bun. And he says with AI, that moves to the place where you have this really thick decide bun, right? Yep. The decision is maybe more time consuming and more thoughtful. The execute piece shrinks significantly because you just tell your computer to go execute it for you. And then delivering it involves more testing, more sanity checks, more articulation of the decision you made. That really resonates with me. It's like, but effectively it ends up being the same amount of work for the human. Mm-hmm. The work just shifts around within that infrastructure.
That's right. And the last thing I'll bring up, there's a lot in here. It's a long piece. But the last thing that I'll bring up, which we've hit on before here, and I think this might be, if you had one big takeaway, umbrella takeaway for all this, says that the practical advice around AI is to use it as a quote unquote crane for the mind, but not a substitute for having one. So if you're using AI, you can save time. Reinvest that saved time in learning. Don't outsource tasks before developing enough expertise to judge the output. That is huge. Just like the intern, right? We talk about the analogy of an intern. At that point, especially when tasks are like really important, like where it really matters, like know what good output, what great output should look like before you start using AI to do that work.
Yeah, but this is really frustrating to the middle schoolers of our generation, because before AI, what you should probably do to get smart is take some of your free time to read a book. And after AI, you have this super genius on your computer that can do all your homework for you. But what you should probably do to get smart is take some time to go read a book. Like, not that much. It seems like so much has changed, but not that much has changed. You still have to build expertise away from the computer.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I sent this over to you. Did you look at the video of the professor, I think it was a college professor, that put the white font in the assignment? Did you look at that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the background here is a professor I might have been high school. I'm not sure if it was college, but he had 35 students in his class, and he wrote, the assignment was to write an essay. There were 3 topics of conversation.
Yep.
And on the third topic, he hid in white font instructions for an AI tool that said, use the word Madagascar in a nonsensical way in the essay.
Yep.
And 32 of the 35 students turned in work that had Madagascar in the essay that made no sense. I mean, what's the percentage there?
Yeah. So that means that they copy and pasted it into AI. Like that's
100%.
Because if you just read it,
proofread the work.
Exactly. If you just read it and did not copy it, you would not see that text. The only way that text comes into play is if you copy and paste it somewhere else. And this 32 out of, it was a 34, what does it matter? 32 out of 30 anything.
Out of 35. We're calling it 90+%. And what's outrageous about it is, I mean, come on, people, at least get better at your copying and pasting skills. Like,
yeah, it's so disappointing. Like, it's so disappointing, and it's scary. Have you seen this term? I've only seen it in the last few weeks, but the term that people are saying, we are now in a post-literate world.
No.
Where maybe this is just for America, not the whole globe. I don't know. But the idea is that, like, we've stopped reading. We've stopped consuming and thinking on our own. Mm-hmm. And instead, to what this piece is saying not to do, we started outsourcing all of our thinking. We've started, instead of reading, we started looking at small clips. We started looking at headlines and assuming the text of everything. We've just stopped consuming and critical thinking. And I don't know if we were ever really there, but whatever we were, it seems like we've stopped doing even that. And this is a prime example of it that is pretty frightening.
I mean, I've read that, I think it's Paramount Plus is starting sitcoms that are like 2-minute clips or something, because the attention span is so, your average human is so poor that you can't even do a 30-minute or a 20-minute episode. Those Seinfeld episodes you're getting through are like, it's like reading an 800-page book these days.
It really is, like, crazily. Somebody was telling me recently that, I want to say maybe it was for Netflix, but it was, regardless, it was one of the services. They were, when creating content, they had to shift the way that they were creating content to repeat the same phrases over and over again, because they knew that people would be looking down at their phones while they're watching.
This
so they
is
would
from
miss.
A Matt Damon, Ben Affleck interview. I'm not sure how true it is, but that's the,
It doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
It supports our argument.
But it is interesting, right? The hypothesis that the second screen, which is someone's phone, is always in play. So you have to dumb down this storytelling.
Yeah.
Might be true. So back to this piece. There's one thing I want to wrap with. Early in the piece, he talks about there's 2 narratives around AI right now.
Oh, yeah.
The first is that AI will replace our expertise, and the doomsday scenario there is build wealth now before AI obliterates your ability to make any money, right? The second one is that one I think is much more reasonable. AI will amplify our potential. And he even has some graphs here about like your expertise today and how you don't have expertise in every area, but you do have clear expertise in certain areas. And you can see how that's amplified with the use of this like digital assistant that has an incredible, a vast piece of knowledge that you can validate as the true expert in the field. That's just where I think we're headed. And the key here is, I think the key for folks who haven't developed strong expertise yet is you still have to do the hard work to get there, because there has to be something to amplify, right? If you don't really have any expertise,
anything times zero is zero.
Yeah, that's basically, it's like this will 10x your expertise in some area, to use a round number.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you don't have any expertise, you're just the people copying and pasting the essay that's yelling Madagascar for no reason. There's nothing to amplify. And to get that expertise takes the same amount of hard work that it's always has, in my opinion.
You lost me at hard work.
That's all we ever talk about on this show. It's so boring.
It is, but you gotta do it. You gotta do it. So for my book, I'm collecting people's life stories, right? And learning so much in this process. One of the things that is interesting is I ask some version of this question to many of the people. At some point, I say, like, why were you chosen for this? How did you build credibility around this? Like, and people have a hard time with that often. You have to go back. I'm like, because they start to say these platitudes, and not. I don't mean that they like. I don't mean that negatively. It's just they don't mean for them to be platitudes. It's just like, I worked hard. And I was like, well, were there other people working hard? And it's really interesting diving down to specifically like what they did. But a lot of times, some version working harder than other people does come up. Mm-hmm. And what I don't know is whether many people understand what hard work is. Here's what I mean. And again, I don't mean that to trash people, but I think what people might define as hard work is not that hard. It's part of the problem. Because when many of these folks are talking about working hard, the things that they do are like off the charts. I mean, they just say it as, oh yeah, I worked hard. But no, like you went so deep in the trench that when other people say work hard, it's like I hit my 40th hour of the week. Like that's not and quantity is not quality. So but I'm just using that as a
some people
example.
Work hard when they show up at 9:35 when they're supposed to be there at 9. Like that is grinding.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, there's an interview question, not for these interviews, but like when I was interviewing people for a job, there's an interview question that I loved. Other people probably hated it. Like getting it, they probably hated it. But here was the question: tell me the hardest problem that you solved and how you solved it. The reason I asked this question is because, one, I get to understand their definition of hard. Because if somebody could be like, oh man, somebody put 2 + 2 on the paper, and then I get to understand the creativity on the other side. But the most important part for me is that first one. Like, what is your definition of hard? And I put this out to our listenership of think about your own definition of hard, and has that changed over time? Because I think that's pretty interesting.
Love it. So that's it this week, guys. SkippyDoogles@gmail.com. Premium subscriptions to support the show. Supercast or SkippyDoogles.supercast.com. You can get extra episodes and investing breakdowns and stuff there as well. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.